In all of my years working security, nothing comes close to this in terms of the craziest thing I've ever seen while working. Back in 2009, I was working full-time as a security guard for a business that was rather new at the time. My job was to drive out to several locations that hired us to do patrols after their respective closing times, and to check up on their buildings and structures to make sure they're locked up and secure, or to provide security at local hospitals or local sporting events. I worked the graveyard shift and split my time between our local hospital and patrolling. One of the locations I visited regularly during this time was a self-storage business where you could go and pay a weekly or monthly fee to rent out a unit for whatever you needed it for. I only visited the business once or twice a night at designated times due to its somewhat secluded location and long distance. I should mention that no one should be there with me because the place closes at 10 p.m. The units are gated off and only the owner and security have access through the automated gate via keycard, while the outer perimeter is surrounded by chain link fences. The only exception is the west side of the business, which isn't fenced off and instead shares a border with a large wooded area. On this particular night, I showed up for my visit and everything went routine. I drove through the gate and parked nearby, and with my trusty flashlight, walked around to check on the locks of the office and each individual unit to make sure they're all closed and secured. Everything looked good and I left. I come back a couple of hours later around 3:30 a.m. for my final patrol and security check of the night. I'm walking down the final row of units checking the locks when I came up to one that wasn't locked. Number 27. When I had come by earlier, it was locked, but now it wasn't. I lifted up the door to the unit and shined my flashlight inside. To my horror, I saw the butchered remains of a hog lying on a small wooden table in the center of the unit. I gasped at the smell of it and shined my flashlight around and saw that the unit was empty except for the table and the dead hog. I noticed that its innards were strewn across the table. Blood soaked the table and there was even some of it on the floor of the unit. I closed the unit almost as fast as I had opened it and hurriedly ran back to my vehicle to make note of what I had found and to call 911, all the while trying not to vomit. I was redirected to the state police and the dispatcher sent somebody out, but it would take them about 20 minutes to arrive. He told me to stay there and wait for them, and so I did. I drove away and parked my vehicle in an area where you couldn't see it from the unit and sat in it waiting, typing down what I had found on my company laptop, and once I was done, took a position where I could see the unit from a distance and keep an eye on it. I looked at my phone a little while later and noticed that 15 minutes had gone by. I sat there waiting patiently for the trooper to arrive when I saw somebody coming from the wooded area towards the row of units where Unit 27 was. I noticed that he was carrying something with him but couldn't make out exactly what it was. I sat and watched, and sure enough, the man opened up and entered Unit 27 without closing it behind him. I was trained only to intervene when a crime is taking place, verbally and never physically unless to defend myself, but due to the circumstances surrounding this particular instance, I kept my distance and just watched instead of confronting him. I called the dispatcher back and told him this new information and the description of the man. Caucasian, thin or average build, probably around 5'7", wearing a black hoodie and sweatpants. I watched the unit closely and eventually the man came back out empty-handed and shut it behind him. I didn't see him lock it and assumed he would be back once again. I was still on the phone with the dispatcher and told him what I had saw. Once he was out of sight, it took about another 3 minutes or so until I saw one of the troopers drive by. I continued to wait on the phone with dispatch and was eventually told that they found the man and had him in custody, and that another trooper would arrive to talk to me so I can give him the full details. All in all, they found the dead hog, a jar, a large knife, and an empty bucket inside the unit. I learned that the man was actually only 15 years old and had access to the unit because his parents had rented it out for a month but never ended up using it. He was going to be charged as a juvenile with trespassing and animal cruelty. I heard nothing of it afterwards, not even as much as an article on our local news site. I wondered for a while afterwards what would have happened if he had arrived sooner and found me looking inside the unit. Would he have attacked me? Surely he wouldn't want anyone to know about what he was doing, and if he'd be willing to kill innocent animals, who's to say he wouldn't kill a human? I was visiting my friends in my hometown a couple months back. Just a girls' day at Selena's and Kara's apartment, listening to dubstep, gossiping, and enjoying a good old 3-bong rotation. Flashback to earlier in the day. I'm driving with my friend Blanca to grab food around the corner from S&C's place when B points out the man waiting at the crosswalk on the corner. He's wearing a red pullover, dark jeans with unkempt facial hair, and an all-around dirty appearance. He was young looking, college-aged even. B goes on to say, "Oh my god, that's S&C's stalker. Why was this the first time I had heard of this?" "Well, we knew you'd try to blow the dude's balls off and that you would be worried for them," she says. "You're damn right, I am that friend. With both parents being federal agents, I've been trained to be aware of everything and I know what to do in multiple situations. So to say I'd be sitting on the roof like a sniper waiting for him is accurate." I make eye contact with the stalker as I round the corner, looking at him in my rearview mirrors, and I've never been luckier that I paid attention. We head back to the apartment where Selena and Kara tell me about their stalker once I brought up that I definitely knew what was going on. In summary, they tell me that they've seen him on their college campus nearby multiple times. Around the library, around their sorority house, and was even standing near the apartment when they came home from a movie early in the morning. Yeah, I'd say he was stalking them all right. He appeared at these locations on several accounts. We all continue to hang out, and now it's around 6 p.m. as the sun is set. Their apartment has one mediocre light outside of the door. You can't see shit through the peephole. Someone knocks on the door. My eyes shoot up to make sure it's locked and we're good. I look around and all the girls are in the living room. I say, "Hey, don't answer, everyone's here." Always be hesitant to open the door. We weren't expecting anyone and no one else needed to be there. I go to the peephole and then turn back to the girls in the living room and say, "It looks like a dude. I can't really tell. It looks like it could be two." I return to my seat because, like I mentioned, the gang's all there. "Selena, I love you, but Jesus, you could have ended our lives with your next action." She opens the door, not cracked, not slightly, but all the fucking way. We're all sitting within view from, guess who? The stalker in the red pullover. He stares into S's eyes and says, "You love me, huh?" She reaches to slam the door and I see him begin to lunge. Thankfully she closed it in time as Kara runs up to help secure the locks. I grab B's hand and instruct the girls to move away from the door towards the kitchen walls. You never truly know what could be on the other side. Bullets or anything could fly through at any moment. He slams his hands on the door in a giving up fashion and leaves. Obviously the police are called and he shows up and asks for a description. All of my friends look at each other and have no idea what to say besides the red sweatshirt because they really weren't looking at him or trying to get a description. I give the officer the description based off seeing him earlier. I knew that gut feeling to catch the longer view in my car mirror was for a reason. I called my mom to come escort us to our cars parked across the street. She shows up, practically guns blaring as she sees someone gathering up items in the distance, like a sleeping bag, plastic bags, water jug, etc. She shines her flashlight to him and his eyes glare up like a deer in the headlights. I've never seen anyone run that quickly. Her yelling, "Yeah, that's right, you better run, you sick fuck," was one of the best highlights of the night. Now, unfortunately, the story takes a sad turn here. The girls tell me that the cops couldn't do much as the stalker hasn't really done anything. You know, that whole thing. About 3 weeks following, Selena texts me saying she's at a party and the stalker showed up at the party. Was just hanging around outside and she apologized to her friends but she needed to inform the police because it was a dangerous situation. You can't play with that shit. I guess the cops made a report about it, but it wasn't until a female security guard at S&C's apartment complex was raped and assaulted. When she described the man, it was the same fucker who came to the door and matched what I had stated in the report. My mom just searched his file the other day. He was awaiting trial with a female judge who does not play with this kind of shit. In the words of my mother, he will definitely remain in prison. At the time of this story, I was 20 years old. I'm now 27 and I should also mention that I'm a female. I was working part-time in the cosmetic department at a drugstore, working mostly evenings, being a student and all. I was never overly afraid of being there at night. It wasn't a bad neighborhood at all, and there were always at least 4 people working in the store at a time. However, regardless of the neighborhood we were in, idiots will be idiots, and the theft rate in our store was at an all-time high, and it was usually targeted in the evenings. This company was a fantastic company to work for, and they genuinely cared about our safety. And of course, the products that were going missing, so they hired a security company to help cover the store in the evenings, mostly the cosmetic department. I should also mention that although there were other employees in the store, the cosmetics department is pretty secluded and there was only ever 1 employee scheduled in the department at a time. Because of this, the company of a security guard was definitely welcome to help pass the time on a long, quiet night. I worked 4 evenings a week and another girl covered the other evenings, and it was for the most part the same schedule each week. There were a few different guards that would come to our store, but on occasions it was this one male. I'd guess around 25 years old, not unattractive and very friendly. Let's call him Mike. Mike would come in his uniform and post at our counter and basically scare away all the potential thieves by just doing that. Quite often we would chit-chat and pass the time having idle conversation. I'm very talkative, pretty much an open book, and sometimes too forthcoming with personal information. I began noticing that on my shifts it was only ever Mike on duty, and I asked him about it, to which he replied,
"Yeah, you're just stuck with me now. Everyone else has other postings."
That was entirely possible, but I didn't think much of it. That is, until I went into the store on one of my nights off to pick something up and saw that there was a different guard there with one of the other evening employees. We'll call her Sarah. I said hello to Sarah and the other guard and then said, "Oh, it must be Mike's night off." To which the other guard replied, "Mike only works Sunday through Wednesday." Well, that caused a little lump in my throat. That was my exact schedule. It has to be a coincidence, right? Well, 20-year-old naive me thought so. On with my life I went, not worried about a thing. The things that followed were a series of minor creepy encounters with Mike. Running into him at the movie theater in my town when I knew from previous conversations that he lived in the town 20 minutes away, which had its own theater with the same showings. Having him show up at my work on a day that I took an extra shift in uniform, claiming he was on his lunch break, and now his prescription's at my store instead of the one near his house due to better service. I asked the pharmacy tech if he had a prescription filled, and he said no. The next thing still gives me the chills and is when I started being not so friendly to this guy. I also want to make it clear that on many occasions while having conversations with Mike, I had mentioned my awesome boyfriend. There's absolutely no way he thought I could be available or interested in him. After a vacation that Mike took with his friends, he was back to working the same shifts as me at the drugstore, and I was remaining neutral towards him, still having conversations to pass the time. He asked if I would like to see some photos he had taken from his vacation. It was a road trip, so he had a ton of scenery pictures. I said sure and took his phone from him. He said,
"Just keep swiping left to all the pics."
So I'm scrolling through and one swipe too many and I'm looking at a full-blown dick pic. Of course, I kinda jump, stutter a bit and say, "Oh, whoops, I think I went a bit too far there," and then pass the phone back to him, thinking it's a total accident and he clearly sent that to a girlfriend or something. Except he isn't embarrassed at all. He replies with,
"I was hoping you'd see that."
And the creepiest grin I've ever seen. I'm getting chills again just typing this. I was all of a sudden very busy and didn't have time to chit-chat that evening. The next morning, I decided to place a call to the company he worked for and explained to them that I thought he might have a crush on me and I was feeling slightly uncomfortable. I told them that I didn't want to cause a scene and was hoping they would just change his location or at the very least, his schedule. I sometimes have too much compassion and didn't want to get him in trouble and was worried maybe he thought I would like his dick pic for some reason, and that it was my mistake. Like I said, sometimes I'm a little too open and maybe he got the wrong idea. I was thrilled the next night when I went in and there was another guard at the store. I was really grateful that his supervisor had listened to my concerns. However, when myself and the rest of the closing crew locked up for the evening, we heard a car's engine start up just as we left the store. When I looked for where the sound was coming from, it was in the corner of the mall parking lot, which was completely empty and dark, and I felt a knot form in my stomach when I realized it was the same vehicle Mike drove. Although I couldn't quite make out the exact color of the car, I was convinced it was the same. I was trying so hard to convince myself it was just someone with the same vehicle also closing up for the night. The car drove out of the parking lot, which made me feel a lot better. When I got to my car, I noticed a note under my wiper blade. It read,
"I'm so sad that my location got changed. We'll try to come back to your store as soon as I can. In the meantime, let's get together."
And then he leaves his phone number. I'm basically puking in my mouth from nerves at this point. I jump into my car and get the hell out of there. The next day, I called Mike's supervisor again. This time I told him the whole story and asked that they relay the message that I am not interested and to please leave me alone. I also told my store manager, who was a pretty awesome guy, who responded with an, "Oh hell no," and placed a call to the supervisor as well, asking that Mike be advised not to ever step foot back in our store's premises. I didn't see or hear from Mike for a few weeks after. I thought I was in the clear. I hadn't told my boyfriend anything about this at this point. It was a fairly new relationship and I didn't want him to be weirded out by it. Weeks later, and I'm barely thinking about Mike and his forceful advances when it's a very rainy evening and I'm at work setting up a new fall collection. When it's raining and dark, it's pretty hard to see out into the parking lot of the store. Basically, all you can see in the windows is the reflection of yourself in the store. I was over by the windows, bent over, putting some things on a bottom shelf when a car honked outside the window. Of course, I looked up to see what was happening, and as I did, over my shoulder in the reflection of the store, I could see Mike standing behind me, just standing and staring. I think I jumped a little and probably peed a little bit. I tried not to make like I even saw him, although I'm sure he knew I did, and I hustled to the other side of the store where the same manager who I told the story to was working. When I told the manager, he ran back to the cosmetics department, but Mike was long gone. We later watched the whole thing on camera. That evening, my manager placed a very angry call once again to Mike's supervisor, who told us Mike had quit the week before after being told to stay away from our store. You may be wondering why no one called the police at this point, but honestly, it just didn't seem dangerous enough. No one was getting hurt, it was just kinda creepy. That is, until I had finally told my boyfriend about it and my parents, and I stopped driving myself to work. I had developed a bit of fear going to my car alone at night. Therefore, either my boyfriend or mom or dad were driving me and picking me up from work. Except this one night. My parents were out of town and my boyfriend had a thing to do on this particular Sunday evening, so I drove myself. After closing time, I said my see you laters to my coworkers and walked to my car at the end of the parking lot. The parking lot has a river at the end of it with some benches overlooking the river with zero lights at nighttime. The only lights are the ones shining from the middle of the parking lot. So I'm walking to my car and I see nothing, and then I hear someone speak. I immediately recognize it as Mike's voice. He's saying something like,
"Why would you do this to me? Why would you make me believe you wanted me? We had so much fun together."
As luck would have it, the pharmacist that had closed with me that night wasn't yet in his car, and he was taking out the garbage around the side of the building to the bin. I yelled, "Jim, wait up a second," and hightailed it over to his vehicle where I probably said a little too loudly, "Call 911. The police arrived and scoured the area for Mike, who was gone without a trace. I never saw him again, and I hope I never do. I'm a 16-year-old girl from Colorado. This encounter took place earlier today and I thought it was creepy enough to share. There's been a lot of talk about cops and officers of the law abusing their power, and I'm not one to claim that all police officers are horrible people, but this definitely challenged my perspective. I was at a retail store, popular enough to remain unnamed, with my mom, brother, and grandmother. I had dropped them off in front of the store and left to park. Walking into the entrance, they were nowhere to be found. I assumed they were already shopping without me. As you walk into the entrance of this store, there's usually 2 or 3 claw machines against the wall. I love claw machines, and I know it's pretty lame. As I was beginning to put my first of $7 into the machine, I could see the reflection of a man approaching me through the glass of the game. I'm quite an awkward person, so any unexpected human interaction makes me jump a little bit. I turned around to see the security guard. He was a young white male, probably in his 20s. I hadn't even entered the store at this point, so I was confused as to why he was coming up to me. I couldn't have stolen anything or done anything wrong.
"You'll be the first one of the day to win,"
he said, chuckling a little bit and winking at me. I gave a nervous giggle and turned back to play the game.
"What's your name?"
he asked me. taking a step closer. In a panic, I gave him my real name. He was a cop, so why shouldn't I have? After a few moments of awkward conversing and unwanted compliments about my appearance, I decided to leave the machine and start into the store. Do you ever get that feeling when you can literally feel eyes scanning you up and down? Yeah, that was me. I turned to see him as I walked off and he looked absolutely pissed. Okay, weird, I thought, but maybe it wasn't a big deal. Okay, so here's the turning point for when things get creepy. I walked around the entire store at least 3 times. Every 3 to 5 minutes, I'd turn around and see the same security guard as if he were following me. Of course, it could have been a coincidence. That was until what happened next. I caught him filming me. I can even remember which aisle it happened in. I was looking for glycerin and gelatin for a special FX project when I heard a lady yelling. I spun around to find the security guard with his phone pointed at me, and a lady apparently caught him filming me. As soon as him and I made eye contact, he walked away. I looked at the lady who called him out and she told me what she saw. She told me that he was filming me and the video was about 10 minutes long. I didn't know how to react to this as she walked past me to continue shopping. I didn't see much of him after that happened. We left the store soon after, but not until I played another couple of rounds of the claw machine. About an hour ago, I got a text from a phone number that I didn't know. As I opened it, I almost pissed myself. It was the video of me taken earlier today. I blocked the number after showing my parents. We reported the number, but nothing has been discovered yet. So, Mr. Security Guard, I hope I'm fortunate enough to never meet you again. My name is Crawford and I'm 19 years old. My girlfriend Lauren and I decided to get a place together in the city. We eventually moved into an apartment and there was a security guard there named Phil. Phil was cool at first. He would greet everyone as they walked in, but things took a bit of a turn for the worst and got a bit sketchy. Me and Lauren have an apartment on the very top that overlooks the city, and you have the pool and the hot tub at the top of the building. Me and Lauren always go up there around 1 a.m. just to chill and talk and have a little less time together. Phil comes out and says,
"What are you two doing up here so late?"
Lauren can pick up vibes of people easily, and she felt really uneasy around him, and I told him, "Oh, we just wanted to see the city at night." And Phil says something that still creeps me out to this day. He said,
"Would you guys have sex in front of me?"
Lauren says the most funniest thing ever afterwards. She says, "You know there's a website called Pornhub where you can go and watch people have sex on there. Now will you please just leave us alone?" Phil got mad at Lauren and went back into the building. A couple days later, me and Lauren celebrated our 1 year and was heading back into the apartment to have a little bit of fun. Right in the middle of it all, Lauren screams bloody hell as she saw Phil in the bathroom doorway jerking off to what we were doing. I called the front desk and they called the police. The police came shortly after and we explained the entire situation to the police, and thank God he lost his job. We still live in that same apartment, but that was probably the creepiest thing that's ever happened to me in my damn life. I'm happy that we don't have to deal with that anymore. This happened to me when I was 19, which would have been in 2003. I was born and raised in a small town and I was pretty much sheltered throughout my whole childhood and teenage years. I was always warned about stranger danger but had never really been in a bad situation before. That is, until this happened. After high school, my best friend Jennifer moved to Los Angeles to attend USC. I would say that at this point in my life I had never even been to a truly large city before. So when I went to visit her, it was a bit of a culture shock for me, especially things like the subway, bus, and train systems. Everyone seemed to know exactly where they were going with no help from anyone, and it was overwhelming to me. Luckily, I made it to her dorm okay from the airport. I stayed for a week or so and we had a great visit. Jennifer and I were always together, which made navigating public transit fairly easy and comfortable. However, on the day I was to head back to the airport, she had to work. I didn't want her to worry and I felt fairly comfortable after riding the bus and subway throughout the week. I said my goodbyes and managed to get on the train to the airport. The first stretch of my trip to the airport went fine. I think I had even printed off directions. In case you've never used the LA train system, it travels through a lot of smaller neighborhoods before it hits the more recognizable, typical "this way to airport" signs. At some point, I became convinced that I was going the wrong way and that I had no idea where I was, that I was going to miss my plane, panicking basically. I got off at the next stop and found the map of transit lines, studying them like they were written in Greek. That's when he came up to me. Now, when I think about what he looked like, it's a blur. From what I can remember, he was big, probably had about 100 pounds on me easy. But he was a security guard and was very friendly, asking me if I needed help. He seemed to genuinely want to help me, and so when he asked me if I wanted a ride to the airport, which he said was very close, I accepted, grateful to get where I was going. For me at the time, the security guard was as good as a cop. I know now that is not the case, but I implicitly trusted him because of his badge and uniform. The first odd feeling I had was the way he threw my suitcase into his trunk, just tossing it in and slamming the trunk. Then I got into his car. It was filthy with cigarette butts and trash strewn throughout. I remember not knowing where to put my feet and had to put them on top of the piles of garbage. Still, he had a picture of a little kid dangling from his rearview mirror, and so I thought, okay, it's not a big deal. He's a good person. We start driving and I have absolutely no idea where he's going, but of course I wouldn't. However, after a while it's clear that he's not going to the airport, or at least not the direct route. I try to stay calm and ask him questions. He asserts that he knows where he's going and that this is the fastest secret way. Stuff like that. We end up in a pretty abandoned business area. A place for freight and other businesses that were either closed or empty. There wasn't a soul in sight, just deserted stretches of road. He begins circling the same streets, retracing where he's already been. At this point I'm freaking out, but I don't want him to know how scared I am. It's here that I feel like I wake up to the bad position I'm in. He had these reflective sunglasses on and was smoking cigarette after cigarette. After a while of me asking where we were and where we were going, he stops talking altogether, refusing to answer me. After a long period of driving in silence, he starts to ask me about my underwear, how long I had been wearing it, what color it was, etc. At first I played along, trying to be cool, I guess. I made up the color they were, saying that my boyfriend wouldn't like the conversation. Stuff like that. I tried to placate him, not wanting to make him angry. Then he told me he would give me $100 just to see my underwear and began to reach over to try and touch me. I just told him no, that I was not interested, and he didn't stop trying. At this point, I'm fully aware of the danger I'm in. The only thing I wanted was to be able to get out of the car. I began to think about how bad it would hurt with how fast we were going. I began to tell him that if he just wants to drop me off, I can have someone come get me. I remember trying to make him think that none of this was a big deal, that he could just leave me and that I would be fine. I just wanted to leave the car. I kept trying to remind him that I had a plane to catch and that I was worried that I wouldn't make it. It's hard to remember how long we drove around in what felt like the middle of nowhere. I was leaning far into my side of the passenger seat, thinking that I would just have to jump if it got bad enough. And then, after a final refusal to let him see, touch, or smell my underwear for money, he speeds up and leaves the area we were driving around in. He drives me to the closest train station quickly and pulls into the parking lot. Needless to say, I've never been so happy to see a train station. I quickly get out of his car and make sure people can see me. I remember thinking that was important. He gets out of the car, pulls my luggage out of his trunk and throws it onto the ground, then calls me a bitch and speeds off. I didn't tell anyone this story for a long time because I felt so stupid that I had put myself into this now obviously dangerous situation. I still feel this way, but now I worry that I should have just told someone. That maybe he did this to someone else who didn't get so lucky. I moved into a large studio apartment complex a few months ago. I'm a single female with a 2-year-old daughter. My sister and a few of her friends came over about 3 weeks ago to hang out, have some beers, and play Cards Against Humanity. My studio has an enclosed patio, safe for a door-sized opening. Since my child was sleeping, I had everyone chill outside on the patio. We were having a great time, joking, talking, and listening to low-playing music when the security guard entered my patio. "Hi there, are we being too loud? Has someone placed a complaint?" I said.
"No, you guys are fine. I'm just doing my rounds,"
he replied. He lingered for a minute more and then strolled out into the night. We continued our activities and didn't really give him a second thought. He returned about 25 minutes later, right after most of the group had left. Only my sister, her friend Cody, and I remained. He was an overweight late 40s to early 50s white male and wore glasses. He strolls into my patio once again and strikes up conversation. We learn he's a retired cop that had to quit the force after suffering a heart attack on duty. He states that he had to undergo a bypass surgery and after recovery he started night security jobs. I felt sorry for him because of the medical history and sat and listened to him for quite a while. He must have stayed at least 30 minutes before my sister got uncomfortable and loudly announced that we were going to bed. He bid us good night and left. Once we got inside, my sister said that she didn't like the way he was looking at me and she thought he was taking a liking to me. I initially told her she was reading into it too much and that he was just a dude that was lonely and had a long night shift ahead. 1 week and a half later, my sister is visiting again and we're sitting inside my place talking. My studio has a black screen door and a wood door. I had the screen locked and the wood door wide open to let some air in. My sister is talking to me and I have the sensation that someone is looking at me, so I glance up. The security guard is standing at the doorway of my patio staring. I say hello and he jerks forward, as if expecting an invitation in or something. But I turn my attention back to my sister and when I glance back again, he's gone. This week on Tuesday, I took a shower and threw on my robe. I was washing dishes for about 25 minutes and had poured a glass of wine. I turned from the kitchen to sit on my couch and I strangled a scream. The security guard is almost pressed up against my door, staring right at me through the foot-long crack of the wooden door. I was so startled and shaken, but the first thing I did was to make sure my robe wasn't exposing me. I ran up to the screen. "You scared me." No emotion and no apology.
It's okay, I was just doing my rounds.
My scalp is crawling and I'm still shaky. Okay, well, I'm going to bed now. He's still right up next to the screen door all the way inside my patio, and then he turns to look at my beach cruiser parked against the wall.
Oh, you have a bike? You should put it inside because someone could take it.
Yeah, good idea, I'll do that, thanks. I pretty much slammed the door shut and locked the door. I sit down with the wine and calm my nerves. I was shaken up but wasn't sure if he was really being a creeper or just a lonely individual that was looking for someone that had expressed interest. After a debate with my friends and sister, I contacted the property manager. I was actually surprised at how quickly it escalated. They took my verbal incident report over the phone and just informed me today that the guy's been fired. The property manager told me if I see him again on the premises to call the police. I'm posting this story on behalf of a friend. She doesn't speak English or have a Reddit account. She wants to tell a story that happened just a few weeks ago on her senior trip. Here goes. I had been waiting for my senior trip for years. 10 whole days by myself without my parents and just with friends and the guys from the travel company. I actually had a really great time, save for someone that made me really uncomfortable. The security guard. He was the guy in charge of the security in our wing of the hotel. The first time I met him, we chit-chatted. He was a nice enough guy and I'm very outgoing and love talking to people. He told me to guess his age and I guessed 45, but he was 30. We laughed and parted ways. The next day, I went out clubbing with my friends and had something to drink that my stomach didn't like at all. I went back to the hotel early in the night, around 6 or 7 in the morning. He saw I wasn't feeling well and offered to accompany me to my room. I said sure. He came with me, we said our goodbyes and parted ways again. Nothing strange. The next day, he started acting strange. He asked my age. I told him I was 16, but I lied. I'm actually 18. And he didn't believe me, so he asked a guy from the travel company who I happened to be friends with who said I was 18. The security guard said,
"Oh, you're legal then. Nice."
I felt a little creeped out. That night, he asked if I was a virgin and I said it was none of his business. On my 4th day there, I was waiting for the elevator with some friends and he came. He put his arm around my shoulders and started asking questions like if I had a boyfriend, if I was going to be naughty on this trip, that we could do fun stuff and he wasn't going to kiss and tell. I felt really uncomfortable. After that, he kept blowing me kisses every time he saw me. He also put his hand over his heart and did kissy faces. The second to last day of my trip, I was about to go out with some of my friends when I realized I forgot my phone. So I told them to wait for me and I would retrieve it from my room and be right back. There was no one on the part of the hotel where my room was because everyone was out having fun. Literally no one. My friends and I were the last ones to go and my friends were downstairs. As I got to that part of the hotel, I heard someone nearby. Outside of my room was the security guard. He was there waiting. I got really creeped out and felt really unsafe. I was totally alone except for him. What the fuck was he doing there? I just forgot about my phone and went back downstairs to my friends. I didn't tell them anything, just said that I couldn't find my cell and went out to have a good time. On the last day of my trip, the security guard was sad. He kept telling my friends how he never got to be with me and that he knows he could have shown me a really good time, that he had waited for me for so long and I let him down. I was sad when the trip ended, obviously, but also relieved because I didn't have to see that creepy guy ever again. When I first got out of college back in 2002, I worked the night shift at a Walgreens about a mile from my parents' house. Because it was overnight, we had a security guard. Usually it would only be the same person a few nights in a row. It tended to be people who had other jobs or hadn't slept in several days because of working so much. Then we got a regular security guard. At first he seemed fine and my supervisor and I liked having the security. Being women working the overnight shift alone on Long Island wasn't super dangerous, but enough that it was good to have a third person if one of us was on break. Then things started to get weird. When I would restock shelves, I would notice the security guard just staring at me. Once I watched him out of the corner of my eye as a reset and stalked the entire deodorant section for at least 30 minutes, and he was staring at me the whole time. Not moving, but just staring. This behavior went on for a few days, but I didn't really say anything about it because he wasn't coming anywhere near me. He would also disappear for an hour at a time several times a night. He didn't really talk that much to me or my boss, which was odd because all of the other security guards had been at least somewhat talkative. At the beginning of a shift, his supervisor came in for some reason and was trying to find him. My boss said that he might be in the back. Apparently, his supervisor found him asleep in the break room. While his supervisor was calling the company, the security guard grabbed his phone and got into a fight with him. He then started yelling and basically freaking out. The cops got called and the security guard had to be tackled and carried out of the store by about 3 cops. In order for this to happen though, my boss had to say to his face that he was no longer allowed in the store. He came back a few days later specifically looking for my boss and I. Thankfully, we were both off for the day. After that, we got pagers for if something happened and the head of the security team came and hung out with us for a few days after the old security guard had come by. I felt much safer with the pagers. I never saw him again, but every time when I would be by myself on the floor, I would eye the door in case he came back. Luckily, he never did.